Welcome to our channel Scary Sagas, where we bring you the most amazing true horror stories. Today, we have bone-chilling stories that will make your blood run cold. These stories are based on real events and have been passed down among the people. Are you ready to hear the ghastly ghosts and demonic spirits that still roam the deserted halls and corridors? When I was young, my class took me to a Texas nature trail park, 5th grade, to Miller Springs. We were meant to work in pairs, but I avoided the group. No one recognized me since I wasn't a popular kid. They're straying off the path. I was by myself for about 10 minutes. The rain came on suddenly, but it was quite light and hazy. It felt more like a mist than it did like rain. The sun was still shining, and the surroundings were lovely. I sought a cliff edge with a view of a valley below because I wanted to get a better look. I slipped when I was standing at the edge. I panicked and grabbed the pebbles. Although I was trying to climb higher, I could feel my shoes slipping as I did so. The rain's wetness made it challenging to ascend. I reasoned that staying put would be safer. I shouted for assistance, but no one responded. I was quite concerned that I may trip and die. I attempted to climb up once again when my wrist was grabbed. I had never seen this other child before. "You have to be careful. A lot of people get hurt here," he grinned and warned. I thanked him and inquired as to his knowledge of the path leading back to the trails. "I absolutely do," he replied, "and can prove it to you." So we strolled side by side. I struck up a conversation with this boy because I wanted to be his friend. The rain eventually stopped. We kept walking till I saw the child wasn't with me. I was entirely by myself when I turned around. Nobody where I looked. It seemed as though he had never been. I retraced my steps and peered down at the ground behind them to see that I had been by myself the entire time. I had returned to the cliff. The child left no trace of any footsteps in the mud or dirt. I was told that in Guatemala, during the misty rain they call chippy chippy, spirits come out. Under chippy chippy, ghosts can only take on a physical form. Until that day, despite hearing stories about it, I had never believed them. People have reportedly been saved by spirits during a chippy chippy or have gotten retribution for those who harmed them. I ultimately made my way back to the bus's parking spot by myself. When my teacher saw me seated on a rock, she inquired about my whereabouts. I told her I got lost and had to come back. That very much concluded the matter. I never received a bad grade for leaving the class. That was my class and another classroom, which was the problem. No additional vehicles were present, the only two buses. There shouldn't have been another family there as it was a weekday possible, but very rare. I've made attempts to explain it, but there is always something strange. Like how the other child's footsteps weren't in the mud or dirt. I'd have recognized the young man if he had been a pupil from either of the two courses. Although his family could have chosen another location somewhere, there is only one entry to the park, and it is located somewhere down a single road. Personally, I believe that day involved a supernatural event. A ghost child came to my aid. I checked the newspapers, but I didn't find anything about a local child passing away, so I'm not sure. It took place in 2017. From 1999 to 2018, I kept a cat as a pet. He lost the majority of his hearing in the 4 to 5 years before his death. It was so much joy to sneak up on him and scare the living daylights out of him. He also caused me to develop an allergy, due to the difficulty it caused. My allergy would occasionally keep me awake at night. This time, I couldn't get back to sleep after waking up at about 2:30 in the morning, so I reasoned that I ought to annoy the cat. He was uncharacteristically sitting in the hallway and gazing into the pitch-black living room. So I seized the chance to startle him. I approached him from behind and waited for him to notice me. When he did, he leaped up, recognized me, and began purring. Yet, there was an oddity. With his usual behavior, he would begin purring and focus solely on the person who would allow him. But this time, he kept casting looks into the living room. It seemed strange, so I searched the area thoroughly but found nothing. I bribed the cat to accompany me back to the bedroom since I didn't want to spend the entire night standing in the corridor. He continued to look behind himself as he followed me to see whether what he had seen had been followed. As I was still unable to see anything, I assumed it was just goofy cat behavior. Once I sat down on my bed, he did so shortly after, coming over to pet me while keeping his eyes on the opening of my bedroom door. I eventually grew bored of this behavior and tried scratching behind his right ear to see if I could get him to stop. As a result, he stopped casting looks in the direction of the entrance. What followed, though, is something I cannot explain. Several papers I was working on at my desk flew off into the air as I heard a heavy stomp coming from behind me. My cat did not peek behind me when I jerked up. He was observing something just next to my bed while looking up and to his left. Nothing caught my eye. My cat leaped down and returned to the hallway, where she continued to gaze into the living room. I watched videos on YouTube for the rest of the evening while I tried to make sense of what had just transpired. I just went ghost hunting at the Emily Morgan Hotel with two of my pals. It is noted for being a hospital, cremation, psychiatric facility, and hospital morgue. It was voted as San Antonio's second most haunted location. It was closed and reopened as a hospital with 13 stories in the 1920s. However, it is rumored to be haunted. I'll start by refuting some claims. It's believed that in some rooms you can hear a hospital gurney being pushed down the hallway. But if you stand by the elevators, the chains create the same exact sound. So it's more than conceivable for people to hear that scary sound directly across from an elevator. Another untrue rumor is that you can hear the water tap and toilet turning on. You might hear someone sneezing from the bathroom since the walls are so thin. The elevators weren't operating on their own. Perhaps children were simply playing button smash. My pals and I stayed in room 10 on floor 8. Level 8 wasn't mentioned in any papers, and it was even claimed that it wasn't haunted at all. We felt quite let down by that. Around 11 o'clock, we got home from our night out. After relaxing in our room for a while, we made the decision to go get some water. It was now around 11:30 p.m., and there were only 3 of us on the elevator. My 2 buddies were closest to one another in the right corner where we were standing, and I was by myself in the left corner. As the elevator descended, my 2 buddies had already begun to have fun. When I drew nearer to the lobby, my friends paused as though they had been startled by something, and I jerked as I heard someone whisper in my ear. I couldn't hear the whisper since it was so quiet, but I could tell a guy was talking. The youngest member of the group claimed she felt so lightheaded she thought she could pass out or fall, and my second friend, who was the oldest, said the same thing. I told them I had heard an odd whisper. Someone was walking through us to contact you, which is why we felt dizzy. My oldest friend, who freaked me out, remarked. I refuted her theory and determined that it was probably because they were dancing and the elevator's speed had risen as it descended. Even told my pals to be quiet when I heard whispering in the elevator again. But it seemed to happen whenever there were 2 or more whispers. We explored the hospital on the 12th floor and the 14th floor, which was a crematorium. When we first arrived on level 12, we noticed that there was a strong cigarette and cigar odor, and that level also housed the only operational ice maker. It was hot up there and the air was stiff, like the AC was out or something. When we finally made it to the 14th, also the 13th floor, after returning to our hotel room and creating a hot tub with our deep tube filled with warm water, one of my friends brought a speaker that was running low on battery, so I let her borrow my charger. But the crazy thing is that it didn't charge at all. My charger was a little broken, but it would have charged slowly. Another problem is that my friend's phone was 90% when it dropped to 55% after taking a few pictures and videos of the room. My two buddies were conversing while I was once more dozing off, exactly like in the elevator. I glanced over my right shoulder and saw a tall, white figure heading quickly toward the bed, also known as the wall. I ignored it, though. Playing and watching anime on Adult Swim was how the evening came to a close. I can still hear myself ranting at the EVP I captured, calling the spirits cowards. As we all heard a faint scream and my friend became alarmed, I cut off the EVP and explained that it was only Ripley's aquarium slaughterhouse. Indeed, we all slept in the same bed, and I placed the EVP next to me on the nightstand. I also slept near the restroom, with the exception of my companion shoving me nearly off the bed and me smacking my head on the nightstand. We both slept well the entire time. Yet out of anxiety, we left the TV on and one lamp on. The TV was on at roughly 17, but when the kids' show started at 6 in the morning, it climbed to about 28, startling up my elder friend and me. She saw that the GoPro she had put up was off while she was still somewhat awake, so she assumed it had run out of battery and dozed off. I went to sleep right away. After waking up an hour later, I turned off my EVP, got dressed, and started packing. The GoPro was still on and filming until I turned it toward the restroom just before I was going to get ice. After returning after acquiring ice, my pals and I watched the EVP. We heard eerie noises. They seemed to be speaking above the television. While the TV was on, the audio would abruptly become louder and completely deviate from the TV audio. Also, it sounded so close that the audio resembled that of an emulator. On the audio, we could hear other items opening and closing, like the drapes sliding open and shut. The dialogue that we overheard was mangled to the point where the voice recorder was unable to pick it up. I hear other noises, like bumps, thrown objects, and rattling paper. The continuous beeping that I heard for the entire 2 hours of audio gave me the chills. When I showed my dad the recording, he informed me that the deep tones were coming from a cardiac monitor and made the funny remark that you guys probably stayed in the psychiatric level. My buddies and I couldn't figure out what it was, but we all agreed it was the phone. I felt uneasy after that and switched off the audio. When we inquired about the room we stayed in, the front desk clerk informed us that a woman had been murdered. The murder occurred early on Thursday morning, and the time with the most activity on my EVP was 6 in the morning when I was finally able to conduct research on the room. Reconnecting with my friend, she revealed that her GoPro shut off 5 times that evening with no timer or other alarm, claiming that we were more alarmed at home than in the hotel. She supposedly had more feminine energy, whereas I had more male energy, according to my pals. During the EVP, my friend actively queried the subject in a friendly manner. Although I don't think this hotel is haunted, I suppose we had a decent scare. Side note: while I was listening to the EVP, my cat went berserk whenever something strange occurred on the recording, and a few minutes after I shut it off, I had really bad heartburn. My chest and stomach were really burning, and I was in excruciating pain. We were relocating to another province when I was between the ages of 5 and 6. We were staying at a nearby shelter because we didn't yet have a place to call home while seeking one. I don't remember the location of the shelter, but we were informed that it had been turned into a shelter after someone decided to use the abandoned building. We were informed that the shelter had once been a portion of an institution or something years and years before I was even born. Regardless, we had a peculiar room that was, I'd say, about 8 by 9 feet, with a heavy metal door and 2 bunk beds, one on either side of the room. The bunk beds had metal framing and seemed slightly despite the fact that it was only temporary. The concrete floor and lack of even a little window didn't lead us to moan. On that floor, there were only the two of us residing in a room. I clearly recall that, as part of the arrangement to stay there, my mother, siblings, and I were cooking meals for the shelter at the time. It was our turn. Also, it featured a basement, 2 to 3 stories, and at least 40 other occupants. I recall getting into bed early because I was so exhausted. My mother unlocked the heavy door, allowed me inside, turned on the light, and then waited for me to up the ladder to the top of the bed before bidding me good night. Mom then turned out the light, and I curled up under the covers but couldn't get to sleep, so I kept staring up at the ceiling. I'm not sure how long had gone when I heard what sounded like someone climbing up the ladder on the bunk bed directly across from mine. As my older brother usually slept there, I assumed it was him. So I talked, and he managed to sneak into the room without waking me up. So I remarked when I saw someone was on the mattress across from me and the creaking stopped. Hello. Then you didn't need to break in since I can't sleep. Only to receive silence. He normally spoke right away, either to tease me or to put me to sleep. So this was uncommon for him. The only thing I heard was the little rustle of the blankets. Assuming he hadn't heard me, I yelled, "Hey Aiden, did you guys finish the food yet?" Louder. No answer. "Did you this?" I started to worry that he could be upset about something. As a result, I sat up and turned my head toward the bed in the hopes that I might comfort him if he was. But before I could say his name, I realized it wasn't him, yet a shadowy figure at the time. A girl my age had 2 braids and was wearing a voluminous vintage outfit. She had been cross-legged, directing her gaze at me while pointing. I hid under my blankets for a few hours after being so terrified that I was unable to scream for fear of being hurt in some way. A few hours later, my mother enters and turns on the light, followed by my siblings. Since I could see the light on, I assumed someone was in the room and that I was safe. I jumped out from under my blankets, quickly descended the ladder, and embraced my mother. She asked what was wrong because I was still shaking. But I held off telling her what had happened until the following morning when we went for our morning walk because I thought the girl was still in the room. After describing what transpired, including how I couldn't sleep, and thought it was my elder brother getting on the bunk bed next to me. But it was actually a girl with braids and a puffy dress who was only a shadow in the darkness. My mother was scared, but to make sure it wasn't just her imagination, she went and inquired about a purported ghost at the shelter without disclosing anything I had told her. This woman, let's call her Courtney, informed my mother that when a ghost roams, it assumes the shape of a young woman with 2 braids and an antique outfit. After you guys moved in, she stopped coming to see me every night. It could have been because we were the only kids in the refuge. I'm not sure. Well, my daughter saw someone with the exact description you had given me, and at first I assumed it was just her imagination, or words to that effect, was how my mother responded to Courtney. Courtney then turned around and left. After that, it became relatively quiet. though occasionally I caught a glimpse of something moving in the corner of my eye, or occasionally I heard the sound of knives being sharpened in the kitchen when no one was there, or I heard screaming occasionally from the basement when no one was there. Nevertheless, it was a family room that could be reserved. When our family first reserved it, it included children's toys, colorful maps, wooden tile floors, and a TV. We were seeing Land Before Time at the time, and I was curious to see what was on the other side of the room. She hurried around the corner, and there she was, standing in the midst of the basement's dark side. The basement was in an L shape, and we were using half of the L side of it. However, now that I'm less terrified and more intrigued about her, I kind of assumed that she wanted to play because she was in the toy area of the room. My mother asked me where I was going after I got up silently from the couch, thinking it was a game of hide and seek. I gave no response and just walked into the dark side of the room, which she found odd because I had a fear of the dark back then, as most kids do. She was perplexed as to why I would go into the darkest part of the basement, where light didn't reach willingly. She came after me as I went into a dark closet. I began hurriedly scanning the area and asked, "How are you doing? Why don't you join me in a game? Is that the reason you keep avoiding me?" I repeatedly questioned those people in that way. My mom asked me why I was acting the way I was, and according to her, I said, "She wants to play." She then switched on the lights, grabbed me up, turned off the television, and carried my siblings and me upstairs. After that, my mother and the rest of my family inexplicably developed scrapes and minor bruises. We moved there when my mom found a place within a week, leaving our toys and other belongings behind since we thought a ghost would have taken them and followed us. We just kept a few clothes, money, food, and IDs, and we bought new items from the store. They resided away from the shelter on the other side of the city. My roommate and I moved into the flat where we are currently residing 2 years ago. He and his wife separated. I was living with them at the time, and she moved in with her parents, forcing us to move. We obtained an apartment together because neither he nor I had anywhere else to go. I volunteered to let him live with me because he is like a brother to me and we get along great. We didn't have any problems for the first 6 months or so. But as time goes on, things keep getting crazier and weirder. My roommate suffers from depression, anxiety, and other mental conditions, and the separation has made them worse. My friend, who has had psychic talents since she was a youngster, revealed to us that he had something tied to him that had been with him ever since he was a child because of the trauma he went through as a child. She claimed he was prone to attracting ghosts and other supernatural beings to himself. Prior to her telling us this, we both reported seeing shadow people in the flat but kind of dismissed them. Then, suddenly, things changed, and he requested her assistance in eradicating it because it was becoming increasingly violent, causing him to scratch, experience terrifying night terrors, affect his mood, and encourage him to harm himself. She obliged, but we don't know how because she wouldn't share. For a while, everything was all right, but things suddenly appear to be picking back up. Our dog will stare off into corners. Our kitchen cupboards have been opened and then reopened this morning. Nothing has even been thrown around. And I have previously detected strange odors in the apartment, including smoking, flowers, and perfumes colognus that nobody of us wears. Also, the door to my bedroom, which I always close tightly at night, has been open, despite knowing that I close my door before going to bed. I have woken up countless times to find it unlocked. I've had a difficult year as well. My father died away in January of last year, And I changed jobs in April as a result of being overstressed at my previous position. I'm less anxious today, but I'm still working through my father's estate and grieving his passing. My roommate claims he isn't opening cabinets or my door, and he isn't self-scratching, he does keep shirt nails, so I can believe that. Some of the scratches have been deep and drawn blood. Although I tend to believe him, I am not entirely certain that he is not doing it to frighten me. The shadow figures, however, I am certain are real because I have personally witnessed them. They seem to like that these stories will leave you with more questions than answers. They are a reminder that sometimes the truth is much darker and more mysterious than we ever imagined. Join us next time on Scary Sagas for other spine-chilling true stories.